Welcome back to another episode of Sky U Pod. Shooty. Today's episode, we're going to talk about Vegas's win total for the Gophers. Not looking great for us. We're going to talk about the new college football playoff format. But first, we got to start with something that kind of happened while we were MIA, and that was UCLA maybe looking into hiring PJ Fleck and him staying home. So, yeah, let's start there. What are your thoughts about ultimately? It sounds like PJ maybe didn't really have a lot of interest in it, but sounds like he was one of their top candidates. Do you think it's more of another PJ's agent pushing a storyline here, or do you think there is some actual momentum there of them going for PJ Fleck to be their next head coach?
That's a great question, Curdy. I think that this is more of an agent thing than anything. I feel like if there was momentum, obviously, if there was momentum, I feel like UCLA would at least get him on a plane to have discussions. Now, did they have phone conversations? We don't know that. We'll probably never know that. I don't think that'll be shared. But certainly, I do think that, um, his agent picked up the phone, let PJ know, and I guess that's as far as it probably got. Obviously, his tweet doesn't really guarantee he won't be the next coach at UCLA. You know what I mean? So,
Well, now it does because they promoted the interim. But
right.
I get what you're
Oh,
saying.
okay.
That
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
initial
yeah, yeah.
the running backs
Exactly.
coach, just to
Yeah.
say, not the interim. But yeah, they promoted him to head coach.
Right. So, yeah, I don't. I think it was just. I think you say it perfectly, Kurt. PJ's agent is phenomenal. And if there's any way to get him more money, this was the most recent example to really get, you know, the athletic department at Minnesota thinking like, man, we got to maybe think about signing this guy on longer, especially if he does well this upcoming season.
Yeah, I thought it was a little odd. So I did initially tweet out like PJ's agent's the best in the biz. I almost tweet that out every time or post that out on X every time now that he's rumored to be in some job. I think the slight difference here was Brett McMurphy did specifically name PJ as a
Yeah.
source. And again, like that could have been the agent side of things, but I really do think they took an actual look at him this time.
Yeah. He's a
And I'm
credible
biased.
source. McMurphy is a good
Yeah.
source. Yeah.
And I'm biased, but like at the moment, I don't see UCLA as a big step up in a coaching pool for football. And specifically
Agreed.
because yes, there's more talent in UCLA. That would be one of the two big factors, I think, is yes, there's more talent where they're located, but you're also not the top choice. USC gets all their guys that they want for the most part. Oregon's been going in, they're getting the guys they want. All these schools have come in and recruited that area. So while there's more talent in your own backyard at that spot, I think it's just as hard, if not harder, to keep it home. Um, Chip Kelly did an okay job. They had that quarterback that was highly touted. He went there, but then after one season, he's committed to Oregon now. So I think it's a tough job on that aspect. Not that Oregon. I mean, Oregon's done that to the Gophers too. So that's not unique to UCLA. The second thing is, yes, UCLA last year did spend more money on their assistant coaching pool than the Gophers, which is a big thing. But they still aren't up as high as I think you would think a traditional school like UCLA would be. They're not they don't spend that much money on football comparatively to some of the other top schools that are in the Big Ten right now or entering the Big Ten. So when you look at those two things, like those would have to be the two definite improvements. I feel like for PJ to leave to go there. I'm not saying he didn't consider it or won't do it, but I think it would have taken a big commitment on UCLA's end to increase the money he's given for assistance. Um, but yeah, that's the only way I could have seen him leaving at the moment for UCLA. Not that, I'm not naive. I get how UCLA could become a much better job than the Gopher program right now. I just don't see it. Like, I don't see UCLA letting him do the slogan stuff on the uniforms, putting the "or" on the helmet. I think that's important to PJ because that's part of his brand that he kind of tries to inject into whatever program he's at, which he has here. And so I don't know if UCLA would go for that. And yeah, it just seemed like an odd timing too to me for them to be so in on him after one of his lesser years here. I would say as not as most impressive coaching debut last year with only the 5 wins. Yes, tough schedule, but there were just some blown leads and whatnot that I feel like you could trace back to coaching from last year. But I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I think UCLA, they haven't really gotten over. I know in kind of within the past 10 years, they've been pretty good in the Pac-12, Pac-10, whatever. Um, but I agree. I don't think it's like a huge step up in terms of like prestige in a school. Maybe UCLA, I guess, in the country overall is considered maybe a little big better step up compared to Minnesota. But I think it's to be seen whether or not UCLA does do well in the Big Ten. We don't really know what that's going to look like for them. It's a different kind of football here, but I think that they're decent. Like you said, they have athletes. I just don't know. You're exactly right. PJ couldn't really influence his sort of culture there. I mean, within closed doors, within a locker room, certainly, but when it's branded across, your whole entire program where others can see it, especially in Los Angeles, I don't know if that would slide over there. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
And at the moment, I still feel like UCLA, maybe this is just me reading reactions on Twitter, like partially from UCLA fans, but, I think there is some truth to this. They seem more focused right now on building up their basketball program and remaining a strength as a basketball team. So, um, I mean, that place is empty every Saturday. You turn on a UCLA home game, there's nobody in there. So
yeah,
it would have been, it's not like, it's a far cry from, let's say, getting offered like the USC job, like that Lincoln Riley took over from
yes,
Oklahoma. Like I feel like some people saw, oh, going out to California, like, oh, he's easily gonna leave. Like I don't think it's quite the same thing at all. I
no,
don't think they have the same money going into the football program right now that USC does. Not even close. And they're not the big football team in town. It's USC that's right there. So I don't
hmm
know. And like I said, PJ could leave at some point. To me, what I hope this does, because I think there was a little bit of worry among Gopher fandom a little bit. What would be great is if this did increase into a bump in the assistant coaching pool pay. We wouldn't have as many, maybe have less Rossi and Soraka situations of your coordinators leaving for different schools, even within conference. So if we could get that bumped up, because I mean, right now that's dead last in the Big Ten. Mark Coyle just got an extension as the AD. He gave PJ a raise 2 years ago after a brutal loss at home to Iowa. Like, I'm not saying I get why that happens in today's age of college football. Like, if you don't increase the pay, he's going to leave. But why was there not more given to the assistant coaches? Like, that should have been where that money went to in that latest contract extension, in my opinion. It was like a mill for PJ and a mill for the coaching pool. It's like that should have been way more heavier put towards the assistant coaches pool when you're this far behind. And the success of the football program is obviously going to be what keeps PJ's job, but it's going to what keeps Mark Coyle his job too. And yeah,
yeah,
they've both been rumored to have interest elsewhere, but it. And I know it's not all that. Like Mark Coyle doesn't just get to decide where all that money goes. He has to negotiate it with like the board at the U and whatnot, and the president and all of those people. It gets voted on for approval and all that. So I know it's not just Mark Coyle can snap his fingers and get it done, but I think that is one. I don't want to say failure, but one major area of focus he has to get going forward to keep momentum trying to get going again. You could even say with the program is get that assistant coaching pool pay up, and then you know, give PJ the best shot to staying competitive in the ever changing Big Ten landscape.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah. All right. On to the second topic here. It was announced today that the college football playoff is switching from, we knew it was changing from 4 teams. They are going to go with the 12-team format. 5 highest conference champs are in, one seeded 1 through 5, and then they're going to have 7 at-large bids. A lot of people are applauding it, calling it the obvious move. Shudi, what was your reaction to this news today?
Well, no, duh, it's the obvious move. I mean, I feel
Right.
like people have been calling this for this probably since the dawn of the college football playoff, right? I mean, it only makes sense that you have your five conference champions obviously competing for a national title. I don't know why this wasn't implemented sooner. And like you kind of texted us today or the other day, Curdy, too late. It's too
Yeah.
late that they've implemented this. And it's honestly a shame. I really do think, I think it's inevitable. Conference movement's going to happen. There's more money, there's TV deals, blah, blah, blah. It's probably going to happen. But at the scale and the rate that it's happened over the past couple of years, I don't think that it happens if this was implemented, say, 5 years ago. You know what
At
I
the
mean?
start. Yeah. No,
At the start, certainly, right? Because frankly, Curdy, it gives teams a better chance to make a run for the national title. I mean, think about
yeah.
it. If you're USC and UCLA, you're in the Pac 12, right? Washington, Oregon,
Yeah.
you're beating each other up, but now you have to go against each other and a Michigan team and a Penn State and potentially Ohio State. You have to go
Yeah.
against other big dogs, this 10-headed snake potentially that is going to beat you up, and it's going to be harder to make a national championship, at least within the
Yeah.
five automatic bids, that is.
Yeah.
So because of this late implementation, there is no really Pac 12 as we know it. The Big Ten
Yeah.
is not as we know it. The SEC is not as we know it. The ACC is the whole Power Five. I'm glad that they did this move because it makes sense, obviously. It's just a shame that it's came at this time
Yeah.
rather than 10 years ago.
Sticking on that point there, like, why, if they would have put this in at the get go, there would have been, for competitively, I know the money's always there and that's what the school cares about. So I agree. These changes probably would have somewhat happened one way or another, much slower. But like, look at Florida State right now and all the storylines about them
Yeah.
trying to buy their way out of the ACC. They
Hmm.
have a way better chance at just staying in the ACC and
Yeah.
trying to compete against Clemson and probably Notre Dame, who's getting forced to play those guys a lot with their kind of agreement thing that they got going. But like, then joining the Big Ten, like that's going to be a way easier path winning the ACC than what's coming to
Yes.
the Big Ten with Oregon, Washington, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, USC. Like, you know what I mean? Like you're
Yeah.
saying, like if anything, I would think that this format would slow that down. But I mean, these teams are just seeing dollar signs at this point. At least the people running the
Hmm.
school, and but like a team like Florida State, you have a big fan base, big fan support. You've been able to use NIL to your advantage. Maybe not as
Yeah.
much as like in Oregon here, but you still have plenty of fundings from the looks of it. I'm just surprised that, I feel like you would have a better chance of maintaining that or even growing that by making continual pushes into the playoff, staying in the ACC, than maybe switching to the Big Ten. And not that I'm not naive enough to believe that they can't make it in the Big Ten. They're going to be a force if and when they join the Big Ten, but it's just going to be a much easier path in the ACC. So I'm
Yeah.
surprised that, or maybe I should say, I'm curious to see what kind of that exit looks like going forward. If maybe they now wait out that contract. I know that contract's like another 8 years, so they're not really wanting to do that. But um, yeah, it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
And kind of like you said as well, is besides being too late, 12 teams is still way too many in my opinion. You should have the five
Yeah.
highest ranked conference champs in and three at large teams.
Yeah,
All these
sure.
extra spots, everyone's looking at this with like, I feel like rose, everything's all fine and dandy, like these rose colored glasses that they're just going to be, oh, this is a
Runner
better chance
ups.
for my team to get in. No,
Yeah.
this
Oh,
committee is
yeah.
going to turn and they're going
Yeah.
to shove in that two-loss Bama team, that two-loss Michigan team, whatever. Like those
Notre
big
Dame.
schools, exactly.
Yeah.
Those are the teams that are going to be taking up the spots. They're not. Put it this way: they're not going to be putting in. I know the Western Eastern thing's gone, but they're not going to put Western champ, conference runner up Iowa in
Yeah.
over a 2 or 3
Right.
loss Bama team. Like that's not what's
Right.
going to happen here.
Right.
You're going to get probably 4 SEC teams in it next year right off the get go. Big Ten will
Yeah.
get 2 to 3, and then the other ones will be filled in by the conference spots. Yeah, it's going to be, people are going to
It's
get sick of
brutal.
it really quick. And
Yeah.
then I did say today, this news came out yesterday. I apologize, but today, just now they dropped too. there's already been discussions now. So this 2-year period we're set in. It's going to be the 12-team playoff. After that 2 years, it's reopened. They got to nail down a structure. They did discuss 14 teams being in the playoffs at the end. 14 teams is, yes, that's more football, but you're just dragging on the postseason. You're gonna have more. I guess it depends how they do it. Like I don't know how the bowl games are gonna work, but you're it's too many. You're gonna make the regular season meaningless here pretty soon of like non-conference
Yeah.
matchups.
Yeah.
What's the incentive to play? Like if Wisconsin and Alabama play this next year, what's their incentive to play each other going forward when it's a 14-team playoff? Wouldn't you rather just pick up a win against Marshall or something and then keep rolling and then just try and do your best in conference play? Why risk another
Yeah.
loss that could knock one or the other out of this huge playoff thing? I mean,
Yeah.
and I get the flip side of that is like if you get the win, it looks really good. Well, sure, but if you get the loss, you know, like
Yeah.
like like Bama's gonna probably get that nod anyway. I don't know if Wisconsin's there right now. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like as far as getting a nod over teams they'd be close to in that sense of trying to make it in
Hmm.
at the end. So I don't know. Once you get too many teams in, it's going to become more and more like the NFL, where yeah, you can
Yeah.
suffer 2-3 regular season losses and still have a decent chance at making the playoffs.
Hmm. Yeah. I totally agree, Kurt. Um, it's just a shame. It kind of just sets up. There's too much conjecture, I guess, when you're making these playoffs. You know what I mean? With four teams, especially, there's always who's the better team. And I think this year just came to a head, especially with leaving Florida State out. This doesn't happen had you done the five champions, throughout college
Yeah,
football. It's easy, cut and dry. Even if it's an upset against, let's say, an undefeated Ohio State goes down by a Wisconsin team that
yeah,
might have a loss on the season, but they came out of the West. But I think that's just college football, Kurt. You know what I
yeah,
mean? It should be hard to make a playoff. It should be difficult to become the national champion. You have to go through this gauntlet, I think, that's challenging. But I think that's what makes college football so exciting. And now that it's kind of straying away from that, the excitement
yeah,
of it is just not there. And I know that sounds really traditionalistic, whatever, and I know it's kind of the old way of things, but I just think from a college football perspective, that is the product that brought a lot of us to it, and
yeah,
now it's just looking like like NFL junior, like you said. um,
yeah.
yeah,
I
it's
mean,
too
everyone
bad.
complained about the BCS era, but part of the thing that made that era great is like every game mattered. It didn't
Every
matter if
game.
it was the craziest upset. Yeah, sometimes a one loss team snuck in there. It happens. Like, not everyone goes undefeated. It's hard to do. But, like, look at all those great. I just think back to some of Pete Carroll's great USC teams. They would get upset. They would go on the road, beat like an Arkansas in the SEC. No one wanted to mess with them. And then they'd get like one kind of weird fluky upset by like a Cal one year or an Oregon State one year, and that would be enough to keep them out of the national title game. And then they would slaughter whoever they saw in the Rose Bowl. And I think some TV people look at that, well, that's crap. I want to see USC compete for the Natty, like if they really were the best team. But like part of the fun was like that upset was that much bigger because it ruined
Right.
their chances to do something
Right.
like that. And
Hmm.
I don't know how special is it going to be now that like yeah, Michigan Ohio State will play every year, and then they might play the next week again multiple times in a row in the Big Ten championship game. Like, it's
Yeah.
just that's not going to be very interesting. It's going to lower the value of that first meetup. Yeah, they'll have bragging rights, and I'm not sure. I know they want to beat each other, but it's just too many teams. It's gonna take away the specialness of the regular season, which in my
Yeah.
opinion is still the best part of college football.
Yeah.
I like the playoffs. It's
Agreed.
fun to watch bowls and it's fun to declare champ. The regular season,
Yeah.
getting to play your teams, is still the best part. But
You could seriously, Kurt, you could potentially see a team, rivals that is, like Ohio State and Michigan, play three times in
oh
a season. You really
yeah,
could. You could see it happen three times in a
yep,
season. And that is, in terms of college football, ridiculous. Could you imagine like the axe or the jug going back and forth in one
yeah.
season? You know what I mean?
It,
It
that would your win would feel so diminished for like the first
right,
regular season when it's built up to be that week's thing, And then it's
Yes.
like, oh, 2 weeks later we're playing again. No,
Yeah.
I mean, if we got to the point where we're seeing Michigan that much in postseason, I could live for it. But
Right. Right.
I get what you're saying. It's gonna,
Yeah.
yeah. All right. The third thing is, guys, Vegas came out with odds for next year earlier in the week, or maybe even the end of last week. I was a little bit surprised, but Gophers are tied for last in the over/under win total in the Big Ten conference play, tied with Purdue at the bottom. The over/under for your Golden Gophers next year is 4.5 wins. Shuddy, just off the get go, what is your reaction to Vegas's kind of doomy, gloomy outlook for the Gophers next
Yeah.
year?
Um, it's hard to look at as a Gopher fan, Kurt. It really is. I mean, that makes it daunting. But having said that, I do think from the outside looking in, it does make sense, right? If you don't know Gopher football, if you don't follow Gopher football and you're just a college football fan, it makes sense. You kind of look at the Gopher schedule for this upcoming season. You got North Carolina, who's at home, but they're going to be a
Yeah.
decent team.
Yep.
You do have Iowa. It's always a challenge. You have Michigan, USC, UCLA, Penn State, and Wisconsin, right? Those are a lot of teams. So you're looking at one, two, three, four, five, 6, 7 potential losses,
Yeah.
like I would say as of right now, probable losses. And so you take 7 away, that's 5. I think that 4.5 threshold is probably right if you from the
Yeah.
outside looking in. As a fan, I'm probably going to hit that over because I think you can sneak a game or two out of that gauntlet there. I think you got North Carolina at home. Drake May's gone. I think that you can do it. I know we're kind of looking ahead at games here instead of
Yeah.
addressing Vegas, but do that. Iowa, Wisconsin, big rivalry games. You never know what's going to happen there. You got some out of conference games. You got Illinois, which can be tricky, a Maryland team, I think Rutgers as well. I
Yep.
mean, these are winnable games, tough games, but winnable. So I'd go with the over, but I'm not surprised that Vegas would say, yeah,
Yeah.
this 4.5 is our number.
Yeah, on top of that, if you're Vegas, you're looking at they just lost Joe Rossi, the D coordinator, who had been outside of last year, been one of the top D coordinators in the country and had a top 10 scoring defense 2 out of his past 3 years. So you'd see that as a big loss. And then also you have a whole new quarterback room. So you're looking at a lot of change for Vegas to kind of see, and then on top of all the reasons you said, yeah, I completely understand the 4.5 line. I would also bet the over, but if you just look at the schedule here, I got it in front of me. Like, if just go by where they're favored and when they're not, I think we'll be an underdog at home to start against North Carolina, like you said. But then you got your two gimmies, or what should be gimmies. You're home against Rhode Island and home against Nevada. Um, Nevada is actually a solid squad half the time, so I'm
Yeah.
not saying it's impossible, but those are your two ones that you will be favored and you should win. So say that puts you at 2-1 to start the year. Then you open Big Ten play home against Iowa. So you're home that whole first month of games, which is nice.
But I'm glad we're
Um,
catching them early, Kurt. I am
oh,
glad
yes.
that we're seeing them
Iowa
early in the
always gets
season.
better. Exactly.
Yes.
Completely agree. So getting Iowa home early, I'd put that at 50-50. We beat them last year, dominated them last year. I'm not, it was a close game, but I mean, the defensive dominated. I'll say that. Maybe that's a better way to put it. So I'd put that at 50-50. So you need, that's a coin flip. Then you're at Michigan. I know Michigan's got a lot of turnover, a lot of new faces there. So it's not as impossible as it was last year. I know last year was a butt kicking. They won the Natty for a reason. But yeah, at Michigan, you're going to be an underdog. Underdog
Yeah.
there. Home against USC, going to be an underdog. Kind of the same thing. Probably not as good as Michigan, but just a lot of athletes that you're, gonna have to face
Yeah.
up against and probably control the clock to win that one. That
Yeah.
game, I feel like you're gonna have to win it like how we thought we were gonna have to win the UNC game last year. Kind of keep
Sure.
Drake May off the field. I know they don't have Drake May or Caleb Williams this year, but just something to look for. After USC, you're then at UCLA. Like we said, they just got a new coach. promoted the running backs coach to be and he's going to be a first-time head coach. So I put that at 50-50 on the road. So that's a coin flip one for me. You come home, then you have a bye week, and then you're home against Maryland. If you're Maryland, you're looking at this as when you should win, and if you're Minnesota, you're looking at this as when you should win. Just being you're at home. So not saying it won't be a tough game or uh, close game on as far as the line goes, but I would put us as favored at home against Maryland probably. So that puts us at 3 favored and 2 coin flips in my eyes. Then you're at Illinois and then at Rutgers. I think you can split that. I'm done picking us to beat Illinois because
Got to see it first.
yeah. And then
Hmm.
you're home against Penn State. They return a lot. They've been getting better, I think, so that you're going to be an underdog there. And then at Wisconsin at the end, you're going to be an underdog. Another game I think you can win though. So that's 3 wins you should have if you give us Rhode Island, Nevada, and maybe Maryland at home. If you can give us that, if you can split Rutgers and Illinois, that's the over. And then if you can win either at UCLA or home against Iowa, that's 6. So I think 6-6 is very doable next year. It's
Agree.
going to be tough, but I think it's within this team's reach, just given what fans believe to be an upgrade now in the quarterback room and a new D coordinator that we think and hope can kind of keep things rolling the way Rossi had, given that it's a similar
Yeah.
style and a similar scheme to what he was
Yeah.
coaching at Rutgers. Now,
Let
anything you
me.
disagree there as far as who I was putting at 50-50 or over under on?
I'm pretty much in line with you, Kurt.
Yeah,
I agree with the new coach, especially a coach that has no head coaching experience, new to the Big Ten. I do think that that's a 50-50 game. It is on the road, so I guess that they
yeah,
have that going for them. But yeah, I think I'd give it 50-50. I think you're exactly right with the split with Illinois and Rutgers. Yeah, I think that you probably win one of them, lose one of them. I would think you lose Illinois and win against Rutgers. Iowa at home, I think that's the key difference. Iowa at home to open the Big Ten. Um, I think that's our best shot, honestly, at potentially winning
yeah,
again 2 straight times.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm in line with you, Kurt. There's no disagreeing there. I guess I would just want to pose a question to you. What's going to be the difference this year in terms of winning or losing? We got a totally new quarterback room. Probably the offense will look a smidge different.
Yeah.
And you got a new D coordinator there that's going to totally change how the defense is. Could be more aggressive, could be the same conservative attitude. Who knows? But what is going to be the difference, do you think, for the Gophers to at
Well,
least get above that win total this year?
yeah. Well, I think as PJ, I don't know if he'd say this out loud, but he would admit they need better quarterback play. So I think that's the big thing that they're betting on. Max Brosmer coming over from New Hampshire, right?
Yeah.
Or is it Road? Yeah, New Hampshire.
Hmm.
Um, So, because the coaches clearly feel in my eyes that they had plays drawn up that Ethan just didn't hit enough repeatedly last year to keep us on the field and to go down and win the game in key moments. So, better quarterback play is kind of an easy one. And then you're counting. I mean, look at the stats that we talked about on the Big Ten huddle when me and Max were on there a couple weeks ago. Minnesota is like one of the top teams in the nation as far as returning production. So all those young guys that got their feet wet last year, they're all coming back. You're bringing back Darius Taylor. 4 out of your 5 starters on the offensive line are back. You're bringing back Jaw Joyner, Cody Lindenberg, Justin Wally. Yes, you're losing Newman on the back end, but other than that, all your best defenders are pretty much back. You are losing Kyler Baugh in the middle, but everyone else on that D line's back. All of your linebackers are back that were significant players, and most of your secondary's back. Like Newman's a big loss, but your Daniel Jackson's back. You've added some receivers. You do lose Corey Crooms, but I think with what you've added in the portal and versus what you've gotten rid of or lost is definitely a net positive as far as player quality, I should say, for the Gophers. So I think that's what you're looking at is just better execution out of the quarterback, You're counting on that your players that got in earlier than expected last year to take those next step and grow and be better players this year, be better contributors, and then just the other additions in the portal on top of the quarterback position that you've added. You're probably looking at what the coaches feel to be an increased talent on their roster as opposed to last year. I also think you're catching like teams at better times. I mean, North Carolina, first game of the year this year, with a new quarterback, and they're losing a decent amount to the NFL. They are bringing back their stud running back, it sounds like, but you know, Big Ten is used to seeing stud running backs. So I'm not saying we don't get burned by running backs, but we're used to seeing physical, good running backs here. So that doesn't scare me as much as say a strong quarterback. Getting Iowa at home and early, that's a bonus that we've mentioned. And then I just think like, yeah, then you're at Michigan and at US or at Michigan, and then you have USC. So I just think like if you can go 4-1 in that first five, say you lose to North Carolina but beat Rhode Island, Nevada, and Iowa, then even if you drop the next two, your next two are at UCLA versus Maryland, at Illinois, and at Rutgers. That 4-game stretch to me is going to make or break the season because that's either going to get you all that confidence heading in towards the end of the year to that matchup with, yes, Penn State, but mainly Wisconsin, or you're going to be morally dejected by the time you get to Penn State and Wisconsin. So
Right.
that 4-game stretch in there with the UCLA, Maryland, Illinois, and Rutgers, I think it times up for you pretty nicely as far as where you catch them in the schedule. Um, but yeah, so I just think there's reason for optimism as far as getting to 6 wins, going to a bowl game again for the Golden Gophers. And yeah, I would bet the over if it was legal to bet here in the state of Minnesota. Might have to make a trip down to Iowa before that line moves. But
Right.
yeah, I don't know. Is there what would is it just because the only thing that would hold me up on betting it is just got to be the schedule, right? I mean, is there anything else that would hold
Yeah,
you up from
you made a
betting?
yeah. I do think it's the schedule, but I do think you make a good point of the defensive coordinator, being that Joe Rossi was very good, one of the top defensive coordinators in the nation, and now you're getting a totally new defensive coordinator, new look potentially.
Yeah,
But you also brought up all of the returners that the Gophers are bringing back, so I do think that kind of evens it out. I do think that again, outside looking in, I do think that it's just easy to say, oh, yeah, they're playing these, you know,
yeah,
well known schools out of
right.
USC, UCLA, Michigan, Penn State, whatever. Um, so I could understand why someone would be a little um,
Yeah.
timid in terms of going with the over there. But I agree. I'd go down to Iowa right now to put the over in.
Let me just read these off to you. I'm gonna go through the whole Big Ten, which is a lot bigger now that we got the 4 new teams. But what one stands out to you the most? Right? I'm just gonna go. This is in order from most to least. Sorry, not Michigan. Ohio State and Oregon both are at 10.5. I know we don't have their schedules up in front of us, just gut feel. So Ohio State, Oregon lead at 10.5. Michigan and Penn State are next at 9.5 wins. Then you have a lot of teams at 7.5. You have USC, Washington, Nebraska, Iowa, and Maryland at 7.5 for the over/under. Wisconsin is by themselves at 6.5 for the over/under. They do have Bama, so I get why theirs is below those other schools. Rutgers, Northwestern, Michigan State, UCLA, Illinois, and Indiana are all at 5.5 wins.
Really?
Yes, and Minnesota and Purdue are your two teams at the bottom with 4.5 wins.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting lines that they have. Again, like you said, I don't have the schedule in front of me. Um, the only way that I would consider like a Michigan State to be where they're at is if their
5.5.
schedule is easy. I don't.
Yeah,
Okay, I do think Ohio State should be at that 10.5, right? You said 10.5 they're at.
yeah, and I
Um,
Oregon I feel like loaded up again in the portal, so it's tough for
yeah,
me to count them
right.
out.
10.5
Michigan's
is
makes sense with
hard.
all they've
Yeah,
lost. I feel like.
yeah, yeah. It was
Um,
the middle ground, 5.5, 6.5
yeah,
there. or 7.5. That it's like, wow, you're giving
So
a
maybe
yeah,
this is the Minnesota me. Iowa 7.5. It's mainly. I'm sorry, but like I know they always do this. Their non-conference usually isn't that hard. It's
yeah,
Northern Iowa, Iowa State, and
yeah,
sometimes one of the other Iowa schools, or like last year it was South Dakota. And we've played those schools before, like schools like that before too. So I'm not really ripping on them, but that's just. I mean, we have North Carolina. They have Northern Iowa
yeah,
as like a just a comparative there, but
yeah,
I suppose the comparative would be Iowa State, but Iowa
yeah.
State is up and down, still not really on the same caliber as North Carolina, in my opinion. But
Hmm.
that's why I think Iowa's up there, and I get the 7.5. I don't know Maryland's schedule, but I want to pull it up because 7.5 seems awfully high for them for seemingly replacing, Tua's little brother and whatnot.
Mm,
And they're just so up and down. And I'm gonna pull it up now because that's one where I feel like just feels fishy.
yeah.
And then Nebraska 7.5. I'm sure their fans will have that at 8.5 before this season starts. So I would wait to bet on that one if you want to. Um. Oh, Maryland schedule looks doable. That's why. So they open up with UConn at home, then they have Sparty at home, then they go to Virginia, then they have Villanova at home,
Oh
then
wow.
Indiana, then
Oh,
Northwestern,
oh,
and
yeah.
then
Okay.
so their first six are pretty manageable. Then on their
Jeez.
back half, then they host USC, then they go to the Gophers, then they go to Oregon, then they host Rutgers, host Iowa, and end the year at Penn State.
Wow.
So I don't know. Northwestern could beat them again, but
Hmm.
it's all pure speculation. I off the top of my head,
Yeah.
I don't know who they all added. That's one that just looked fishy, but after looking at it, they do have a very nice start to the season again. So I'm sure we'll
Yeah.
see another Maryland starting hot, fading late type of season. So,
Yeah.
but yeah. Anyways, fellas, that's been another episode of Sky U Pod. Again, we are partnered with Big Banter Sports. Feel free to go check them out for any Big Ten team coverage that you'd like, including basketball coverage. We are still looking for a Gopher basketball podcast, so if that interests you, hit us up. We'll get you in touch with the right people. As always, guys, though, go Gophs, Sky U.